March 6, 2003, and McAllen Independent School District School Board is having a meeting here in our boardroom, the Chapa room, here located 2000 North 23rd Street here in McAllen. Our first item after calling the meeting order is public comments. We have no speakers, and just for the record, for a workshop, we don't need a quorum, but we do have a quorum of 4. Our 3 other, we'll have 2 other board members attending here in a little while. So, moving on to item number 3, which is discussion of 2023-24 budget. It's enrollment landscape, benefits overview, human resources, and budget update. Before I turn it to you, Dr. Gonzalez, I do want to thank our. I do see some candidates here. Thank you for coming, and hopefully, do they have information? Because I know they have the information to follow along. Awesome. And so on the workshop also is an opportunity for the board just to ask questions in a more informal setting. That's what we're having today. So here's another candidate. I just welcomed y'all, so you're perfect timing. And if you have the information to follow along, Erica, you can get with Natalie to see.
Appreciate
Okay.
it. Thank you.
Dr. Gonzalez?
Yes, sir. TEA and Board Policy CE local required districts to prepare a budget of anticipated expenditures and revenues before June 19th and be approved by the board by June 30th. We have Mrs. Adele Felix, our Assistant Superintendent for Business Operations, who will present the second budget workshop for the 23-24 budget. Ms. Felix.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez. Today we have 4 topics, which include enrollment landscape, our benefits overview, our human resources, and budget update. Tonight we will begin our second budget workshop with Ms. Lisa Cavazos, as she will provide an overview of our enrollment landscape.
Thank you, Ms. Felix. Good evening, everybody. Okay. So I'm going to begin our enrollment landscape with some information that is pretty familiar to everyone, simply because it has not changed very much. So this is our population statistics for the city of McAllen. That first chart there at the bottom there shows live births in McAllen and the fact that they have generally decreased over the last 10 years. However, for the last 3 enrollment cycles have been pretty stable. The population, these are the graphs that you see to the right, has increased over census. However, the original projected rate of increase just has not been met. So we were expecting, if you looked at census information 2 or 3 census cycles ago, we thought we were going to continue to see 20 and 25% increases census over census. And again, it has increased, but more at a rate of 9 to 11% instead of those giant leaps. So this is not new information. This has been pretty stable for the last couple of enrollment landscapes. So just providing it here to refresh everyone's memory. This information here is specific to school-aged children in McAllen. So you can see here I've provided information back to 2010. From 2010 to 2020, so that's a 10-year jump, we dropped 13% in the percentage of students living in McAllen, Texas, attending McAllen ISD schools. From there, we dropped 5.4% from 2020 to 2022, and since last year, we've only dropped 0.5%. So our goal, of course, is to stabilize that and reverse the trend. We want to see us getting more of the percentage of McAllen residents attending McAllen schools and not less. The actual school-aged population, so that is school-aged children living in McAllen, Texas, has gone up a small amount, 1.3%. From 29,849 to 30,257, with that percentage belonging to McAllen ISD or attending McAllen ISD, again dropping that 0.5%. So this information here actually digs in a little bit on those kiddos, those school-aged children, and part of the information that goes into that are live births. So we're able to know how many children are born in our area and then do the math to figure out how many of them should be in our pre-K classrooms and kindergarten classrooms once they turn 4 and 5 years old. So we have been as low as 42% of our live births attending our pre-K programs. And this year we're actually at 58%, and that is up 4% from the prior year and 6% from 2 years before that. So Pre-K and kindergarten enrollment has been a major focus of our student recruitment team. It has been our philosophy that building the base and bringing kids in early will basically fill the pipeline, right? We want them to start with us and stay with us. And so those efforts are definitely shown here. So you might be wondering, of those 30,257 kids that live in McAllen, we only have, again, that 59 or so % of them. Where is everyone else, right? So according to self-reported census data, 28,160 students are living in McAllen and attending a public school system. Right, so of those 17,954, that's the purple part of the chart and the purple part of the graph, are zoned to McAllen ISD and attending McAllen ISD schools, which leaves 10,206 students that are zoned and attending another public school system. Now, there are 2,097 students who report being, of course, zoned to McAllen ISD, but attending a private school. For the purposes of census data collection, homeschool is also considered a private school. So that 10,206 number of kids that live in McAllen and attend a public school system, where do they go? So this chart right here breaks down the year-over-year sort of destination of the kids who live in our district but attend other public school systems. And so the number one on the list is IDEA Public Schools, but I will note that there are 190 fewer students attending IDEA Public Schools this year than there were the year prior. Second to that is South Texas ISD. There are 5 more students attending there than there were last year, which is notable because even though it's an increase, they did add an entire grade level and add a virtual program, but the number of students that they take from us has remained pretty much unchanged. From there, you can see, oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I don't recall, does IDEA have preschool?
Great question. IDEA Public Schools has had a pre-K program. They never fully implemented a full-day pre-K program, and this year they announced that they would do away with their pre-K program. So
That's been the number one issue that we've had through, not the last couple of years, but through, them having the advantage of preschool. They get in the system, and once they get there, they don't want to leave. So I know we've done a better job, Dr. Gonzalez, of expanding our pre-K. We're not where we need to be, but we're getting there. Is that besides them, looking to other school districts, PSJ, the ones that have the green on this, they do also have the advantage of having a more expansive pre-K, right?
So, yes, but the green is actually a benefit to us,
I'm sorry.
right?
I said, I meant the other way.
Yes,
Yes,
so yes, exactly. So actually, the second highest taker of kids, if you will,
Yes.
is South Texas ISD, and they don't have an elementary program at all. So they start at 6th grade as the earliest grade level. Vanguard does have starts at pre-K, same as McAllen ISD. And then the rest, Horizon as well. Horizon is a pretty big taker of younger kids. It's a Montessori program that early on, and so some families are looking for that. And then after that, it's your traditional ISDs.
And my last comment is, I know your team has done a really good job of kind of turning that messaging, because IDEA would say, come to IDEA, we'll get your kid in college and what have you. And I know, Ms. V, I've been talking to you throughout all these years. Okay, there's one thing of getting into college, but it's another thing to graduate from college. And that's where our graduation rates are, second to none. And I think you've done a really good job, your team, of focusing on that message. So we can continue that. I think that's why we're seeing some of those trends, because, as someone who's paying for kids in college, great you got in, but you better finish. And, because if not, that's a lot of money down the drain for parents. So just kind of want to point that out. So a lot of positives there, but we're still not quite there, but I'm sure we'll get there.
Absolutely. It's been some years since I have been able to access that data, but when I was, right around 65 to 70% of students who started college were no longer enrolled by their sophomore year coming out of that institution. So.
And I think,
No, please, ladies.
mine's really quick. What they don't report as well is that 100% of the kids get accepted to college, and a good percentage of those go to South Texas College. So they don't say that, and I don't know that the community actually knows that. So I think it's, for years they've skewed their data, and they kind of made it appear that their kids all go off to major universities or whatnot, that it's, a good percentage of them end up right here at South Texas College.
Quick question.
Yes, sir.
What's the highest population we've ever had in McAllen ISD, and when was that?
That's a really great question. I think we peaked at just under 25,000 students, and that was in 2012.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Fanian brought up a comment, or brought up a really good point. I heard this not too long ago from a couple students who went to IDEA. So they in order to get to 100%, it's mandatory, everybody signs up for FAFSA. Sometimes they do it for the students. So this particular student, after he graduated, didn't know how to do it, didn't have her credentials, and try to call back and, say, I need help and what have you. And it was just, it's still, a fiasco for them. And so a lot of them, they do it for them, and I know we don't. At least in my experience is that we sat with them, and our staff has sat with their students and, walking through the process, and there's other been sessions for parents as well. But that's a big deal too. Like you said, just get them to college and, there's no support after that. So just kind of want to point it out because that was just random people just at a random event talking about how there's no support once they leave, and they did it for them, so they didn't even know how fast it works. So anyway, just kind of sorry to throw you off track, but
No
you
worries.
have it.
Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Alrighty. So this number is the number that's most concerning to me, and we've been working to dissect this number over time, because if you take the number of students on that graph that shows where all of the public school students go that are not attending McAllen ISD, you still have a deficit of 5,525 kids that are not in the McAllen ISD piece of the pie, not in the public school piece of the pie, and not in the private or homeschool piece of the pie. So where are those kids? And they, quite literally, when I tell you these are the kids that keep me up at night, they keep me up at night. And we've been dissecting this number slowly, and I don't have a definitive breakdown, but it is important to know that the statistics for how many school-age children live in McAllen, Texas, does not equal live in McAllen ISD. So we do have parts of our city that, while they are considered City of McAllen, are not zoned to McAllen ISD. Great example of that is the area just north of Sanchez Elementary, Tres Lagos, some areas to the east and west. So that takes a little bit of that information as well. Plus, this information comes from census data, and we know that we don't collect census data every year, so of course population statistics change as families move in and out of the area. Of course, there is infant and childhood mortality as well, and so we are working very hard to really get to the bottom of where this number of students are, because it is substantial. So these are students who have attended school with McAllen ISD, and this is going back to 2015 to this year, and have left us at some point in the year. So that black bar are withdrawals, or we call them leavers in our office. The blue bar is total enrollment. And so you can see that prior to 2020, we had been hovering 11 to 12%. 1920 hit, that was the year that we got introduced to that thing called COVID, right around 11% as well. And then we took a pretty substantial hit in the 2021 school year. That was our virtual learning or remote learning year. That number came down last year to 12.82, and currently we're at 4.92%. And if you track that 4.92%, that is as of end of February. But if you track that out to the previous years and look at the trends for where we were at this time in each of those years, we're tracking to land just a little below that 12.82%. We're going to be looking closer to the 11 to 12%. So we're starting to reverse that trend as well. So why are they leaving? So that first chart on the left-hand side is last year's data, beginning of year to March of 2022. And the number one reason that students left the district has been the same for a lot of years, and that's relocation. Nothing is going to take a kiddo out of school quicker than we're moving away, right? That makes perfect sense. And we call relocation moving to a place that it is just not feasible to attend McAllen ISD. That is not moving to Edinburgh, that is not moving to Mission, that is not moving to PSJA, because we think it's still possible for you to attend our district, and we can leverage the transfer process to make that possible. This is relocating outside of the geographic area that touches McAllen ISD. And so that is still the number one reason students withdraw this year. The second reason last year, though, was kids that were staying home. These were kids that were telling us they were going online with some kind of online virtual program, or they were doing homeschool, followed by neighbors, and we call our neighbors the districts that geographically touch McAllen ISD. And so those two have switched or swapped places this year. Neighbors has jumped back up to second place, and staying home has dropped down to third place. The other and the special circumstances are a combination of kids that are temporarily gone, illness, I moved away, but I'm coming back, CPS cases, things like this that are a little bit harder to label. But those top three have been the top three for some time. The withdrawals for homeschool is dramatically decreasing. So there was a time when there was a very small handful of kids that went to this thing called homeschool, and no one really knew what it was, right? It wasn't a thing. And that number started to increase just before pandemic and then hit its peak during pandemic and is on its way down again. So between the 2021 and 21-22 school year, we saw an increase of 49% of our leavers being for homeschool purposes, and that number has dropped 14%. We also saw, interestingly enough, that the majority of those leavers for homeschool were in the secondary grades, so 7th grade and beyond. And I think we are doing a much better, actually we're doing a great job, quite frankly, supporting those students and making sure that we are offering a lot of different resources to keep them in school, particularly when academic credit or attendance are issues. So then we have students that are zoned to other places and who choose to come to McAllen ISD. Number one on that list is Edinburgh. We have 124 more students attending McAllen ISD than we did the prior year. Number two is Sherryland, followed by PSJA, Mission, La Jolla, and it goes down from there. We did have a decrease in students coming from Westlaco, but kind of a ways to drive to school, not gonna lie. But those students tend to be sons and daughters of staff members at McAllen ISD or someone who works very close by. So our total outbound transfers, that is kids who are zoned to McAllen ISD and attend another public school, decreased 3.5%, and our inbound transfers increased 12% in the course of one school year. This is our out-of-district transfers as a function of our total enrollment. And just if these numbers look a little bit unfamiliar, it's because these are not current enrollment numbers, rather snapshot to snapshot numbers so that we can compare real apples to apples. And so the number of students snapshot to snapshot only changed by 11 students from last year to this year. However, the percentage of students that are transfers decreased by 112 students. So what that says is that while our population has remained relatively stable over the last 2 academic years, the percentage of the pie that is McAllen ISD kids actually increased, which is what we want to see. Of course, we love our out-of-district transfers. Of course, we welcome kids from all over to come to our schools, but we really want our McAllen kids coming to McAllen ISD, and that has been a major focus of the recruitment team over the last 24 months. Reasons for transfer requests, there are 2 colored bars on here. The green are McAllen ISD transfers, so that is I live in McAllen and I am zoned to one school, but I would like to attend a different school in McAllen. And the yellow bar is I live out of district and I'd like to attend a school in McAllen ISD. And these are the most common reasons. Number one is the academics. So some academic, either I'm not challenged where I'm at, or I need something different, or I'm looking for a program, those kinds of things. And that is pretty similar whether you're in district or out of district. The change of address, of course, so I already go here and I moved away, but I want to keep on going here. That's a big one as well. And then that other is all kinds of things. So anything from vertical team is the most common other reason. So I have been a transfer student all through elementary, and now it's time for me to go to middle school, and I want to continue on my vertical team. Is the number one reason that they would have an other on there. Then notably, parent works in the city limits, sibling is at the campus, universal pre-K is on there, as are the IB program and dual enrollment. So just a closer look at enrollment this year. This is my favorite graph, but this shows literally a daily sort of tally of students that are enrolled in McAllen ISD. We started this school year with 19,312, and as of the time of this report, we were at 20,417, and those green and red bars are literally the pluses and minuses on a day-to-day basis. So while it looks like the number is pretty stable, pretty stagnant, the actual activity that is taking place to keep that number, kids leave every day, kids come in every day, is quite interesting. I love looking at this data because it really shows the activity and the efforts on the part of the campus and on the part of our district team as well. So we've had a total of 1,105 students increase enrollment since the first day of school. So the total pie, if you look at every school-aged student living in the city of McAllen, is 30,257. That is the number that is our student outreach teams. Okay, you can take a day off when we hit that number. Just kidding. And if you consider 10% or 15% of that number coming from out-of-district students, which is where we're at right now. We're at about 12%, as I mentioned a few slides ago. Our total pie, our total landscape would be 33 to 34.7 in terms of total heads. Just a quick recap. This is not the intention of this, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention our recruitment, retention, and recapture efforts. Recruitment and recapture have been going on for a while, right? The on the boots on the ground recruitment, of course, our passive recruitment. You've heard about that before, as our recapture efforts as well. Students who leave us, they don't just leave us and never hear from us again. We make every effort to make sure that they know the doors are always open at McAllen ISD, and we phone calls, home visits, all of those kinds of things. The retention effort is really what I wanted to hone in on for just a minute or so, and that is preventing students from leaving in the first place. We have implemented an intervention strategy for campuses to leverage the student outreach team, sort of like the bat signal up in the sky. Oh my gosh, there's a student who's trying to leave the district, and we've had all the conversations, and we will deploy a student outreach team member to have the difficult conversation, and hopefully keep them, right? That is the goal. If not at their campus, then within the district by leveraging the transfer process. Skyward also has a generated message. I get an email as soon as a student withdraws, and that email comes directly to me. We're able to make immediate contact with the campus to learn more, and then immediate contact with the family, again, to catch them before they even leave the parking lot, right? And then there is significant outreach to students that are going from 5th to 6th grade and 8th to 9th grade. Not only are those vulnerable transition grades where students can make decisions to go elsewhere, they also represent the need for a new transfer, for out-of-district transfers or in-district transfers when they switch school buildings. And then our community and pre-K Head Start outreach to make sure that we are retaining as many of those little ones into our campuses as possible. Yes, sir.
Quick question on that topic. How many of those that you catch in the parking lot did we already know about possibly getting into the parking lot?
Yeah, that's a great question. And truly, I know I always get teased for saying that, but that is the million-dollar question right there. I'm going to say very few right now. Very few did we know about as a student outreach team. Maybe a few more that the campus administrators might know of. We as a whole, yeah, I think that the knowledge, right? There are signs. There are what am I trying to say? Signs and symptoms, right? Just like diagnosing an illness, that this is going to happen. Kids that are asking for their transcripts, kids that are frequently absent, kids that have literally already told their friends, I'm not coming here next week, like take my number so we can stay in touch, right? Connect me on the Twitter, Snap, whatever, right? All that kind of stuff. And those are signs, right? And our teachers hear that, our coaches hear that, hey coach, I'm turning in my uniform because I'm not coming to school next week, that kind of thing. The information's there. how to capture that information and make that information actionable towards a true prevention strategy is where we're at right now.
What I was getting at was, is there a cause within us and our campuses that are pushing those kids away, or an issue with those kids, or their parents that is pushing them out? That's what we need to find out. If there's something endemic in our district, we need to put it to bed. That was my question.
Great point.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
To follow up on that, when we started this, 5, 6 years ago, before your department got formed and we went out, the various campuses were going out into the neighborhoods trying to find those lost children. The children had kind of gone off the radar because we weren't keeping track. The number one thing we were hearing when we got the feedback from the parents was they had tried for GT and it didn't work out, and there was no follow-up to explain what occurred and what couldn't be done to help the child, and that's the reason they left. Another was that they had failed a couple of tests, and that they didn't feel like there was any support there or any assistance, and they found it elsewhere. So I agree with things that you're mentioning, but I look at it more from an academic standpoint.
Yes, sir.
Are there any way, any plausible way that we could, within a system of a campus in which, from an academic standpoint, start to identify where you have a child that's struggling and you don't have all the siblings,
Yep.
which that in and of itself tells you something. And so now it's very easy for that parent to say, well, you know what, I know you wanted to stay with your friends, but your brother and sister are over here and they're doing well.
Yeah.
So I wonder, even within the academic programs that we administer, are there ways of testing out or identifying where we start seeing trends? Because I think that, following to what Trustee Velo's point, I think that gets it before they're at the parking lot,
Yeah.
before they start turning in their uniforms and the like.
Absolutely.
So how do we respond as a service to our children and our community with their needs? And are we meeting those needs? And are we having those conversations when children are struggling that is more heartwarming and embracing and empathetic and responding to it?
Absolutely.
Is there a possibility of being able to do this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think what it will take is taking several generations of leavers and literally running an analysis on grade point, test scores, attendance, all of the things, and try to figure out what is the true list of red flags, and then applying those to our current population.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So 8 years ago, when we first came, one of the things that frustrated the most was hearing all the comments from kids going to IDEA and other schools saying, you know, that we get the kid in college and all that, and we didn't have a team to kind of combat that, right? You know, they would go to our schools trying to register. Sometimes they're busy, the principal's in art, and there's no one to greet them. So we developed your team. We made huge strides the last few years, and at least now having a process. I mean, just your plan to go after the kids that belong to McAllen ISD. I mean, I commend you for that. And I know we're not there. We're in education. We're never there, right? So we're going to continue to move forward. So I just appreciate all your team's efforts. The one thing that I kind of want to point out, because throughout the year I do get, I'm sure all of us, and I'll just speak for myself, I have on occasion parents reach out saying, I'm trying to transfer my kid. You know, always refer them to your office, right? And say, you know, go talk to them first, and then they'll help you coordinate visit to the school, the principal, and all that. You might okay it, but then when they get to the school, sometimes the principals might not okay it. And I'm going to tread very carefully because I'm not, you know, just going to bring up, you know, a little bit of an issues sometimes here. They might not okay it or approve it because in this particular case, one student had a lot of absence, and then one had a referral. And in both cases, one had an operation and missed a little bit of school. It was an athlete and hurt her knee and was out. The other one, it was a referral for wearing leggings. And so those two things kind of caused the principal to say, no, thank you. So I guess what I want to bring up is when a principal has that, do they have the final say, or does it come back to your office, or how do we bring you know, address that when there is a little bit of conflict there?
Yeah. So I think the most true answer is that our team looks for every reason to say yes to a family, every single reason, right? And there are sometimes when a student applies, they do have to submit an attendance record, they do
Right.
have to submit a discipline record, that on paper, it looks like they're a risky kiddo to take on. We love risky kiddos. And
Well, but here's the flip side. You like them, we like them, but if I'm
Yes.
principal, I don't like it.
yes,
Because I'm worried about my 99 test score, I'm worried about my 98, so I don't want to bring risky kids. So
Absolutely.
That's where I'm going with it,
So,
so,
yes,
yeah.
totally. And if I may, our job is literally to learn as much as we can about the family and the student. So if it is indeed a dress code violation, if it is indeed, yes, absences, however, there was a significant family event like an illness,
Right.
a hospitalization, it's our job to know that story and tell that story, right? And
But who do you tell it to when principal sign says no? What I'm suggesting, I guess, I'll just cut to the chase, is maybe you have like some type of committee that is a final say-so, because the principal, and I get it, principals, and I don't blame them, because, you don't want to take on risky students either, right? I mean, it's a catch-22. At the same time, we're all these efforts, and another one is, I remember a kid was coming from La Jolla, they missed the seventh period, they had a lot of abstinence because their family picked them up, she was an 8th grader, to go see her son play soccer, her brother play soccer. And so she had a lot of absence, and it was out of her control, but it was affecting us, and they had said no.
Yeah.
And so they're like, well, what do we do now? And I'm like, I have no idea. So I guess that's,
Yeah.
a situation like that, that's.
99% of the time it's smooth. We do have that 1% or less where we work very closely with Bridget's department and Lisa's department and the principal. And just because it's such a competitive market now, it's different than it's ever been in public ed.
Right.
So you have charters and public schools and districts around us with open enrollment as well. So we try to get to yes as often as we can. Every now and then we have an outlier that doesn't get to yes, but that's few and far between. So to answer your question,
I
it's,
don't think it's an outlier, Jay, because otherwise I wouldn't bring it up, because I do have some other examples as well, that I got in and I called their office to refer them over there, because they're, and I get it too, and I don't want to, I respect the principal's final decision on this, but again, they're looking at it from, they don't want to disrupt their school, right? So I think it's a little bit
yeah,
more than just.
we can look at it in more detail and get the numbers. I'm just saying that with the number of kids that we're letting in and the number of kids that we're saying no to, that's what I'm saying. It's a very small percentage. We can get those numbers.
We can,
But we
yes.
can talk, we can get with Bridget's department, and we work closely with the administrators, and it's not the sole decision of the principal to say yes or no.
So when they call back and say they've been said no, and I only have 2 more months, but in case they call another board member, who do we refer them to Bridget?
Yes.
Okay, or back to over here, or, that's where I'm going with that, because if it's unreasonable, I'm like, hey, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you have, you have 30 absence and you don't have a reason.
Right.
I mean, I totally understand that, but when it's, hey, I had a referral, and this guy caught me at Starbucks the other day and said, hey, it was over at Leggings, I had the proof, but they still said no, now who do I go speak to? So I got my answer, I'll just send them to Ms. V. When the principal doesn't agree, we'll kind of go from there.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. But it's been great, I mean, the fact
Yes.
that, we're night and day where we were, so I just wanted to thank you. We're trying to tweak this thing, that's what a workshop's for.
absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Sam?
Yes, sir, thank you. I do want to bring up a concern. It came to light when looking at these slides, and we talked briefly before we started. And being a proponent of no tuition, McAllen ISD has been an open enrollment long before we went to no tuition, but you paid a tuition. And if you went to the IB diploma program, it was no tuition for that. So we were open enrollment long before we were no tuition. And no tuition, tuition was, as low as I can recall, was about $1,500 a year to as much as $3,500, maybe a little higher. And so having conversations with the superintendent then, and at that time, we were, as you can see in this chart, you have on page 6, 2010. I think it's page 6.
I think you're talking about this one.
Yes. In 2010, it was 24,762, and I think you're right, we were just about to hit 25,000 sometime in 2011, 2012. It's not on this chart, but this is a good representation of where we were. And as we move towards 2015, in the conversation I at least had, and I know there were other board members in the room, some are no longer with this board, was that he was looking at birth rate and projections at that time, that we would likely hit by 2020 around 20,000 students. And so as we get our reports, and I was seeing that number, 20,000 students, and then we would dissect it and you would explain, as you do every year about this time, this is the third year, so I have the other two, that McAllen ISD is around 20,500, 20,000. At least from my standpoint, I was not thinking it through to realize, wait a minute, when that Dr. Ponce was the superintendent, he was talking about McAllen ISD students who were residents of the district, and that we would be at 20,000. So when I saw this presentation and went over it last night, and you get to the one where you're showing that we're at 17, well, it's on, this one's here, 17,954 of residents, that to me is real problematic. Because that would mean if we use 20,000, and he said around, so I you know, did more, but I used the 20,000. That's 2,046 students that were down from McAllen alone. And we're going to get further into the budget, and I'm going to be asking some questions about this. But what it comes down to is we're asking McAllen ISD residents to pay the difference that we get from the state for services for the students we're bringing from the others, who their home district keeps that funding. So in other words, the students coming from out are going to get roughly, what, $61.60 from the foundation school program?
Roughly, yes, but then there's deductions and we'll include property tax, yes.
Exactly. So the property tax is not in that element.
No.
No. And that was one of the things when we were having those conversations as a board, is how much of a burden is the local taxpayer that when we ask them in a bond or a TRE, we are going to need to do these sort of things. We're relying on the fact that we're drawing from outside the district.
Well, I would say,
Yes, of course.
I would say that it would be, because now most districts are open, right? They all are gonna fall into that circle. So, you know, for example, you see the Edinburgh students that are zoned to Edinburgh but are here, well, they're paying for their bonds, right? Saying that word, I probably should.
Yeah, I know. No, I mean,
But it's.
you're asking a taxpayer to fill in other words, if we didn't have these 4,000 students coming from outside the district, right, then you wouldn't necessarily need to be doing certain things with facilities. I know it's an oversimplification and it's a path we're not discussing today, I
Correct.
get that. But hear me out. The thing that's different from us than let's say, Edinburgh Consolidated, is that they are now at 35,000 students and growing.
And
They
growing.
expect to keep adding because they have territory space that
Correct.
their developers are gonna continue to build developments, residential space,
And we're locked, yes.
and we're locked in. That's the fundamental difference with that. The other is to the west, to the east of us is Far San Juan Alamo. They're at 34,000 students, and they too are growing. And fundamentally to the west, we have some. Now you couple that where you have, you know, the elephant in the room idea, although they've kind of faltered a little bit, and right to the east of us, to the west of us, they have a facility, and then further south in La Paloma and Balboa Acres in that area, they have another one there too, right near Sam Houston, literally blocks away from Sam Houston and Roosevelt and Wire. And since this decision was made, we've closed 2, maybe 3 elementary schools. Okay? So I'm not trying to solve a problem here, I'm just pointing out that that is a perspective from my end of it that's real concerning as we continue to move forward. We have to dissect that a little bit.
Yes, I agree, we can do that. Also, though, these are also, if you see on our schedule when we get to my presentation, they're not just trying to build new schools. We also need to develop our current schools, right? They're 1970, 1950. So it's about also keeping our current facilities up to par. And so it's more than just building more wings, because if you notice the capacity, we'll have 3 schools that are the ones that are really stretched at this point.
And that's my other point. And just very quickly to that, I didn't want to get into facilities yet, because I think we
No,
don't
and
have
that will
time.
be
I
a
get
different,
that.
yeah,
But the point is, by this time, after 2015, by this time, and shame on me for not being more focused on it. We should have already have a replacement schedule like we have for air conditioning units, for roofs, for all of those aspects. We should have already had a replacement schedule for schools, what timeframe and what we're going forward 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And so that's subject to our conversations going forward. But to the point of the matter, to what was being said about coming into the district, is when you have 8 portable buildings in a school or 6 in another, then my concern is when folks are coming in and they say, we want to become a part of McAllen ISD because you have great programs. They say, well, these are the vacant spots we have. We have 300 open spots at this elementary school and 200 at these other. I don't want those 2. I want these 2. And we know the names. We know the names. And so now we're, again, building portable buildings and putting children in a situation that is not the best, right? And so we're talking, let's say 8, that's 16 classrooms. Why aren't those 16 classrooms somewhere else in the district, which we all know have excellent programs? We all say they have excellent programs. They got a 92, they got a 94, whatever. So I didn't mean to expand on it, but I mean, when you start to hear all this, you're going to have to start realizing that, to me, it makes no fundamental sense that a customer inside is living in an environment that's any different than a customer outside, but the customer outside just dictates what we're going to spend on our facilities, on whatever, because no, I will not go. Then my response is, well, thank you very much. You need to probably look elsewhere. In other words, I don't think we should be taking all takers if it puts a burden and a strain on us that we're using 40-something portable buildings when kids have space in the district, and we need to be thinking about that.
Thank you so much for that, sir. If I may just respond really quickly, is that okay? Go ahead.
Absolutely.
So I live exactly what you're talking about every single day. And if you look at this chart here, you'll see that our biggest number of out-of-district transfers comes from Edinburgh CISD. And we want them here. However, one of our policies is that out-of-district transfer students don't receive transportation, so parents have to be able to get them to school. That's part of the deal. And for a student driving in from Edinburgh, those north side schools are the first ones you hit. And if you don't work further into central McAllen or into south McAllen, it's very difficult to get into town or south, whatever. And even though the schools are excellent and the programs are excellent, I'm trying to do the thing that's easiest without making my child late to school every day. And so it makes sense that those north side perimeter schools are going to be high demand, particularly for out-of-district kids, because Edinburgh, Cherryland, PSJ, that's our perimeter area. So they're trying to stick to what's easy for them to access. And where we do have our list of students that accumulate, where we have to say no, it's because they have said, well, it's this school, no second choice. When there's a spot that opens up, let us know. But we've literally filled that grade level or that classroom to absolute capacity.
Well, you got Hendricks with 247 seats open. That's on the north side. You got Gaddisa with 151 seats. So, I mean, I could, I'm sorry?
Rayburn?
And Rayburn? No, let's see, Rayburn has 193 seats open. And I go down to down. We're not here to discuss facilities, but I'm very interested in that and what the administration is talking about. But you have, and to your point, you're absolutely correct, but again, we need to be thinking about how we're distributing children in this district. And to see openings like that with no portables, which we have to come up with a plan where we take kids out of portable zones. I don't think it's a place for children to be. I really don't. And I think you consist with our students of 17,000 and change, it can be done. And then the others have to be the backfill. And yes, it's going to be a difficult time to adjust to that. But the fact of the matter, if we're going to go with a replacement schedule or schools down the road, and again, this is checkers, not chess. We as a district need to be projecting forward what we need to do for all those schools you mentioned earlier. Then shame on us if we're not anticipating that and making those plans and making those decisions. And more importantly, letting the public know and letting the public participate in telling us where they think we ought to do, where we need to do it, how we need to do it going forward. Thank you.
Quick question, y'all can collaborate if you want. Steady state budget, what is the break-even point for our population?
Break-even point for our population, well, we did like a,
Or revenues?
well,
And-
that would be in my presentation when we
So
get to
you can
it,
give us
yes.
that answer?
Yes, I'm gonna give you that answer. I'm gonna give you that answer.
In other words, I'll give you some time to think about it.
No, it's there, it's
Okay,
there.
all right.
Any other questions?
No.
Just a quick comment, and I appreciate your comment, Sam. I was a little apprehensive about open enrollment when we had the first discussion, but there was a smart board member, that business person, business owner, that said, if you have 15 seats and you're paying for lights and what have you, you might as well fill those seats. And he convinced me, so I still remember that day. So, you know, he sold me on that. I think there, you know, and I understand what Sam is saying too. We don't want to add to, you know, a certain school on the north side if we don't, and I know you don't, because I've gotten those phone calls too, saying, hey, I want to come to McAllen, but I want to go to X, and it's full. I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but we have other great schools. And I know we're doing that, so I just, you know, commend y'all. And we as a board, you know, as long as we support that, then, you know, we're on the right track. So you guys are doing the right things, and I know this is a good problem to have, because we were having this conversation 8 years ago, right, about transfers. We just didn't have that number now. Now it's a good problem to have, so thank you. Any other questions?
I
Yes,
know, but I
ma'am.
have one comment. I don't know how many times I've had to call Lisa, even sometimes on a Saturday or a Sunday, and connect her with families who have reached out to me
Yeah.
that say, we're leaving, or the district, or, you know, we no longer are happy here. And not only does she make the all-around effort, her and her team, to make sure that that family stays, they give them options.
Yeah.
I know I have one parent who toured like 3 different elementaries at Lisa's request before they decided to leave, and they decided to stay. And so really, really proud of the team and the work you do, and thank you for taking my calls even like on a Saturday or a Sunday, and making sure that those families know that it's okay to stay and they're gonna be fine. Thank you so much.
Lisa, thanks for everything. I wasn't for you, it's me. But having said that, to what was said earlier about space, it's absolutely true. If you have 15 empty spaces, but what we've done is we've created 20 empty spaces by bringing in portables. If it was what the original plan was to backfill into the classrooms we knew we were gonna have empty. And in fact, we had some, even middle schools, we had whole wings where the lights were off, classrooms were empty because we couldn't fill them. So it made sense, but when you get to a point where you're leaving 29% of your elementary classrooms in the building, these are within our structure, which is almost 4,000 seats, empty, but yet you have children in portable buildings instead of in the classroom, that's problematic to me. And that's what ended up happening.
I understand. How many schools do we have with portables?
I have a list, I asked the administration, I think they sent them to us. I think about 9 or 10 have portable, elementary.
That'd be good information to have.
It's rezoning.
Yeah.
And for each,
You like to say
each portable building has 2 classrooms.
it needs to be done.
Yeah, so you have 8 like at Gonzalez, that's, you know, and then you have another 6 at Milam. That's the issue.
And we've been talking rezoning 16 years, and before that. But it's time for them to do it, right?
Yeah. It's time for them to do it.
Well, I think you
I'll
said
put
a
it on the
word.
agenda for May.
Yeah, the issue right now is we'd have to go back to neighborhood schools and no open enrollment. Otherwise, currently, our vertical teams simply are for UIL purposes, and they're balanced as they could be right now.
Well, he's got a good point. I mean, you look at the portable issues, so.
Yeah, and the thing, again, this is not something we're gonna, like you said, if we had to do it right now, I'm not suggesting right now. I'm suggesting that you have to be planning this out over the next several years to start doing the things you need to do, and providing incentives for families to recognize that this campus is just as good, as we've said in every board meeting I've been in the last 2 years, is just as good, even more so now because the last score showed we're way in the 90 percentile in many of the
I
elementaries.
mean, if you look at Rayburn as an example, they're 99%. That's the
There you
highest
go.
scoring district, campus in the district, along with all their distinctions. So you can't get any higher than 99 in this world of accountability.
And yet you have 154 empty seats and kids in portable buildings.
Perception.
But perception is reality, so.
Yeah, I know, and we're fixing it. We're
But these
fixing it.
conversations help us and help the team. We have the team that can do it. We're just gonna set up the game plan once we get our marching orders, and we'll rock and roll.
And I'm not saying anything bad about Rayburn. I don't need my wife beating me up when I
Oh,
say.
you already said it,
He's a
sir.
teacher at Rayburn.
It's a great school.
It is a great
It's
school.
Great opportunity for
I
them.
know, right? I mean, she's gonna call me before I get home. Any other questions?
Say, how come the others said it was great and you didn't
I
say it was
know,
great?
I said it's great.
There you
Okay.
go.
You did say that. sir.
Any other questions? Any other comments?
Just one quick comment,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
somebody did mention to me that the teachers are always stressed out too when we top-loaded one particular school, you know? And that's when we see all those slides about, you know, how many extra students, and we're getting requests for waivers, class size, and that's not fair to the teachers either. And so, you know, I'm glad that I hear that from the community, you know, when they tell us things like that, and it's a point we need to really take to heart.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none? Thank you, Ms. Glasses.
Thank you, Ms. Wells.
Thank you, great job, Lisa. Next, we have Mr. Andy Silva. He'll provide a benefits update.
You guys want to
Oh, yes.
Could you introduce yourself, sir? Could you please
I
introduce
came
yourself?
prepared, but nobody asked this time.
Ah, there you go.
So
For the
for-
crowd that can't see
Yeah,
your
so-
name tag, please introduce yourself.
So good afternoon.
So what happened real
That's
quick,
good.
let me just give a little context to it. So what happened is Sophia has a middle name. What's your middle name?
My full name is Sofia Merced Peña.
So one time, it was said, so then he came up and to mirror what she said, he brought up his middle name. So now every time he speaks, we have to ask him what his middle name is, so in case you're wondering.
Sorry, good afternoon.
Hello, sir.
This afternoon, I'll be sharing information on our 3 self-insurance funds, which is the health insurance, the workers' compensation, and the unemployment compensation. So beginning with Fund 753, which is the health insurance, currently the district is contributing $466.50 per employee per month into the fund. This is $26.50 from prior year, which was at $440 per employee per month. For fiscal year 23-24, we're in discussions on the funding mechanism for an additional $2 million that is currently in reserve for Fund 753 and has been rolled over for a few years now. The $2 million could be funded as an additional per employee per month contribution, employer contribution, or the contribution can remain at $466.50, and the $2 million in reserve will be available to be used as needed to pay claims during the fiscal year, or a combination of both. Additionally, if there's any opportunity, the possibility of increasing that reserve amount will be considered. The audited fund balance as of 6/30/2022 in the fund was $3,089,884. There is no optimum fund balance we are required to maintain for this fund, but we established a best practice target of 3 months of claim expenses, and that fund balance target is $5.9 million currently. The projected fund balance at 6/30/23 is $2,439,947. As far as the employee cost share, there was an adjustment to employee premiums that took effect this past January, so there are no employee cost share changes being proposed for 23-24. For Fund 772 Workers' Compensation, currently the district is contributing approximately $750,000 into the fund to pay for work-related injuries and lost time expenses. The contribution is on a percent of salary by payroll classification. The proposed change for fiscal year 23-24 is to reduce the contribution rates by 50%. This would reduce the district contribution by approximately $366,000. The fund balance at 6/30/22 was $2,833,536. Like the health fund, there is no optimum fund balance we are required to maintain for this fund, so we have established a best practice of 20% of the long and short-term liability as determined annually by an actuarial review. So based on that, the established optimum fund balance for this fund is currently $575,000, and the projected fund balance at 6/30/23 is estimated to be well above that target at $2.8 million, which is what allows for the reduction in funding by that 50% I mentioned. The third fund is Fund 771, which is the unemployment compensation. Currently, the district is contributing $2.60 per employee per month to that fund. There is no proposed change to the contribution for fiscal year 23-24. This contribution generates an estimated $115,000 in revenue. Like the other two funds, there is no optimum fund balance we are required to maintain for this fund, so we have established a best practice of 2 quarters of expenses. The established optimum fund balance for this fund is approximately $49,000. The fund balance as of 6/30/22 was $65,572, and the projected fund balance at 6/30/23 is estimated to be $85,347. So I'm going to pause here in case you have any questions on this slide. The remainder of my slides, and there's only 5 of them, I'm going to touch a little bit more on the health insurance fund.
Mr. Silo, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. A few years back, Fund 753, we were accruing pretty good monies to the fund balance, to the point where we even gave December premiums back to the employees. Do you see us getting back on the track of an upward trend of increasing the fund balance in that plan?
I think without some significant employer contributions and maybe even employee premium adjustments even further, I don't see that in the near future. The rate of the expenses is outpacing our contributions and our revenue coming in.
Because we even talked about wiping out premiums for a while.
So those years, and I don't have the exact years, but yes, we had a pretty significant reserve. Then a couple of things happened. We provided those premium holidays, we call them.
Yeah.
And there was a formula established to make sure it was a sound decision, that there was enough money in the fund. We also did wellness screening incentives for a few years. That was pretty significant dollars also, as a way to hopefully increase the number of screenings, and hopefully that'll result in some lower claims expenses. Really didn't see, the return on those expenses, but the other thing that also didn't help is we started the Affordable Care Act fees, so we started having to pay those fees. So all those things combined really turned it in the opposite direction for us, and it's been a struggle ever since, just trying to get to a break-even point on the fund.
Was it 2010, 2011, 2012?
Around those years, yes, sir.
All right, thank you, sir.
Yes.
What's our number one expense right now related to health? Is it still COVID, or is this something else replace it?
No, I wouldn't say it's COVID. We're seeing an increase in our expenses on hypertension. That seems to have been, at least in the last report we saw. Prior to that, it was diabetes. That's excluding the claims we have that we consider our large claimants. Those are the more significant catastrophic type claims, but in terms of the diagnostic categories, right now, it's hypertension.
It's probably more a question for our carrier. Are there programs that we discussed when, we brought them on? Have you seen our numbers increase as far as wellness and all that stuff?
So the wellness program, we've not seen an increase in that participation.
Yeah.
And by that, I'm talking about the program called Well on Target. It's a Blue Cross branded benefit.
Right.
We promote that. We don't have our own per se, that we promote and we administer. We rely on the features that Blue Cross has available to us. The few that we have were limited to the flu shots these last couple of years.
Yeah.
We definitely do promote their opportunity for all our employees to take advantage of the preventative screenings. Under the
Yeah.
Affordable Care Act, all of those are 100%. And so we encourage our employees to take advantage of those.
And this is discussion for later. That might be an opportunity to kind of promote those wellness, because hypertension, all those, if we can get some of our employees into some programs, that might help. I know last year we implemented, and I'll use me as an example, it's just better, so I have an insurance with a different employer, but since my family does family, I'm included, and I'd rather use McAllen ISD because it's better insurance than mine. And we implemented, for someone like me though, a subcharge of $100. And we had roughly, I think you told me, about 500 muscle minerals, that were in that same situation as me, right? Is that number higher or
So,
lower?
so there was about 500 that had spouses enrolled.
Right,
Since we didn't have the information on how many were in that exact scenario,
Right.
that was like the maximum number of people that could have been impacted by that surcharge.
did our numbers drop with this surcharge?
So the total number for that first payroll that ran, I haven't looked in January, but I don't expect it to, February, I don't expect it'll change much. There was about 100 people
That's
that
good.
remained on the plan that are now subject to that
Better than
surcharge.
500. Because we're still liable for those extra.
Yes, sir, yes,
Because now I'm used by them, I don't want to pay $100 a month, so.
yes, sir.
And then my final question, and I'm sorry, it's a very simplistic question, though. I know we don't estimate it, or you're saying we're not going to charge employees for reduction of our health insurance, increase of our health insurance premiums. Do you foresee that happening in the next couple of years?
So I think so.
Okay.
Whether we can go 1 or 2 or 3 or however many years, that really is a year-by-year decision.
Right.
We have some cost containment strategies, and I'll share one of those in the upcoming slides, that of all the levers we've pulled, that one has shown the most savings. On the others, we've not really seen that dramatic of a savings. And I'm referring to the mail order program on the pharmacy. I'll show you some data on that. So it just depends on how we do year to year. Unfortunately, it's a year-to-year decision.
I realize that, I ask because I know we have some candidates on the board, so I'm sure that's, if I was sitting there like, oh man, that's probably one question in my mind is, do you anticipate? And unfortunately, it's year to year. So I guess we'll let you go to the next slides because you're going to discuss this a little bit strategies.
A little more detail on the
Okay.
health insurance, where we are, where we landed last year, because you didn't have an opportunity to get that from me when I was here, because, obviously the year hadn't ended. And then where we are, and talk a little bit about some of the other
Okay,
strategies.
unless Sam, you had a question. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
no, just takeaway, just to be very, very clear here, there's no employee cost sharing being proposed, being considered at all for our employees this year.
This year.
That is correct, sir.
And the other two funds, those are the ones we pay anyway, the district does on their behalf, so that.
That's correct. Those are all employer
No
funded
changes
benefits.
whatsoever.
No, sir.
Thank you much.
So-
No.
For this year,
Okay,
thank you. Oh, that's right, they voted in June.
so
No, Andy's like, you're a man of your word.
I'm on record,
You're a man of your word.
So this is an illustration of how the fund ended up last fiscal year. So revenue about 24.7 million, expenses 27 million, so 2.5 loss. However, we did have $1.2 million in rebates, another $1 million in stop-loss reimbursements, and $289,000 in other credits, some received from our contract with Blue Cross and some other credits that reduced the total. It offset the deficit, and we ended up for the year $12,235 in the red. Our fund balance at the end of that fiscal year was $3,089,884. So as I mentioned, a year like this is actually a good year. We broke even. We'd like to have some reserve buildup, but having pretty much to a break-even year is really part of the goal. We definitely don't want to lose, but we try just to break even if we can. So how are we doing currently? So this is a comparison of July 21st through January 22nd, which was last year, as compared to this year. We are seeing a slight increase of about $300,000 for that same time period last year. Most of that increase is on the medical side, not so much on the RX or the other fixed cost. So about $300,000 difference in the same time period from last year. Now, over the 12 months, last year, on a per employee per month basis, we ended up the year at $623 per employee per month. As it's trending right now, we're looking at $684 per employee per month. Now, as a note, that $684 does not include any of the rebates that I do expect we'll receive, and it certainly doesn't include any of the stop loss or other credits that, are definitely not guaranteed. Those remain to be seen whether we're going to get any more of those. So while it is a little bit overestimated, it's going to definitely be higher than 623, but somewhere less, hopefully, than 684. So this is for the full question? Is there a question?
I was just gonna say,
Yes, sir.
the number you have for Onyx claims, that's the net number after rebate?
So in this illustration, the rebates had not been received, so they're not reflected in here.
So
There's
that's a
always a
lower
lag.
number than it shows. It should be lower than that.
Yes, but that we won't be able to take credit for until the end of the fiscal year. We'll receive 2 quarters of actual checks, and then we'll, in the books, we'll be able to take credit for the other 2 quarters.
That number used to be at $5 million, right?
So $5 million was really where, when we started seeing that peak,
Right.
yes, yeah, right at 5 million. I think right now, and I'll show you, I think we're at 6 million. I think actually, I'm not sure I have that slide, but I think we're projecting we'll be closer to 6 million.
All right, thank you.
So this is the estimate for this fiscal year. So in revenue, about 25 million. In expenses, again, 27 million, so a loss of 1.7 million. When we factor in some rebates, and not the full rebates, we would expect more on a percent, just to be on the conservative side. I'm projecting that 650,387 would be the loss for this fiscal year. Now, again, this is not all the full rebates. I expect that we're going to get at least 1.2, maybe more. And then, of course, if we have stop-loss reimbursements, those will reduce that deficit. That deficit then, or that loss, would reduce our fund balance to $2,439,497. As I mentioned earlier, the target for this fund is 5.9, so we're not going in the right direction.
But
Yes, sir.
Question?
at this point, is the administration recommending any of the unassigned fund balance to go in and infuse this plan at this time?
I'll let Ms. Felix discuss
Well, we
that.
have a reserve of $2 million that we've been carrying, so as opposed to providing a monthly, we monitor it and we meet regularly to discuss it, and if we need to influx of $2 million that we've already put aside that we're carrying forward, we will do that.
But at this time, you're not recommending doing that, but you're going to continue
You
to
can
monitor.
monitor as well as hold the $2 million in case we
In
need
case
to
you
influx,
reserve. Very
yes.
good, that's what I understood.
Mhm.
Okay. So if you were to factor that in, you're at 4.4.
Correct.
And that 2 million, just to clarify, it's been carried over now for a few years, so we haven't needed to access it. The fund, we've been able to maintain it and pay our expenses, so we haven't needed to transfer any of those
That's
monies.
been, what, the last 3 years?
About 3 years?
At least 3 years.
2019, 4 years? 4 years.
4 years. That's
But
good.
that's a line item that's been earmarked for that
Correct,
500,000 a year, right?
correct.
Well, the
two.
last one was.
Yes, and then we
500,000.
added 500,000, we had 2 million, when we started to see the trend.
Right.
Yes,
But it's still there in the budget.
correct.
But the beauty about it is, again, we're not infusing at this time, haven't done so in at least 4 years, and there's no plan to do so, but it's going to be continue to stay in reserve in case we need it.
Yes.
But you don't anticipate that, obviously, because
So,
you're at
so
2.4.
for sure this fiscal year, I don't anticipate having to use it. That's why we discussed that for next year, we're just going to roll it over.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Ms. Felix, at what point is that too much where you stop infusing the 500?
Well, we haven't, so it's held steady,
Oh,
right?
it's-
So
oh, I
we've been
understand.
carrying
No, no, we
forward
haven't
that
made it.
balance because we know what the
I
optimum
understand.
is. And so when we start to dig in, we'll have to relook at that.
The bottom line is, you'd like to see a 5.9 on its own. And
Correct.
then therefore, you wouldn't have that 2 million in reserve.
Yes.
So that's, right now, we're in a balance.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been doing so for the last at least 4 years.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
But that's what you'd like to see, is self-sustaining 5.9 reserve with no hold at all of $2 million.
Correct.
Gotcha.
So this slide, you've seen a variation of it before. As I mentioned, that this is the international pharmacy data. So if you recall, back in January 1st, 2021, we introduced this. This is a program where for a select group of medications, employees would enroll and get their medications internationally, primarily from Canada. As an incentive, when we started the program, we were waiving the copay. The benefit to the plan is that, as you can see on that last column, there's a significant savings in the cost of the medication. So for the first year, we've saved $369,718 through this program. Through September of ‑22, we've saved an additional $494,009. And this is the one cost saving cost containment strategy that I mentioned, that where we've really seen some significant dollar savings. And effective January 1st of this year, we took the next step in the evolution of this program. So it was voluntary for the first 2 years. We had, obviously some good participation, but there were still some employees who were filling eligible medications, but were still electing to fill them domestically. So effective January 1st, we changed that to mandatory. So the remaining individuals and any new scripts effective after January 1st now have to participate in this program. So we're hoping to leverage as much as the savings potential from this program. And this has helped at least keep that increase in the pharmacy spend at a level.
But even that number, there's a maximum amount you can save.
Yes, sir.
It will not go beyond that point.
Yes, sir.
So that's not the answer to saving money in the
No,
health fund.
no. This was an answer to hopefully
Slow it down.
exactly. Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. Again, this is a slide, a comparison you've seen before. So it's always difficult to compare apples to apples, but this tries to compare several school districts and their benefits versus the employee premiums and then the employer funding levels. So since we showed this last, the benefits haven't changed. So the rankings there on the right didn't change for any of those benefits. What did change in the last year, several of the school districts adjusted their employee rates, and several adjusted their employer funding levels. So when we increased to $466.50, we were hoping to at least get a little closer to some of the other contribution levels. But as you can see here, we're third. If anybody had the slide from last time, we didn't move at all. We were third before. We're still third because of the significant increases the other school districts did at the same time. And those ranged anywhere from $10 to $81, I believe. $10 to $81 per employee per month, as compared to our $26.50. So our $26.50 didn't do anything to help us with that ranking. The other thing to note here, one of the school districts adjusted their employer contribution by $10, but reduced the employee premium by those same $10. So they just shifted the cost. So this concludes my presentation. I will close by saying that, we continue all our outreach strategies, and we're always looking for cost-saving opportunities. But if you have any additional questions, I'll be glad to entertain them.
I'm a little, I just want to clarify my mind, and I'm a little slow. It's my education, don't think. It's the $1,000 deductible there, McAllen. Most of us only pay like a $20, visit to a doctor. What does that mean? Is that like $1,000 for like hospital stay or something?
It's typically the hospital stays. So co-insurance, the co-pays are for office visits. For something like a hospital stay, you're subject to a deductible.
But even if we pay $1,000 and I'll pick out the first one, West Coast paying $750, I would think our coverage is, they do a lot of 80, 85, we do 100% on that.
Well, see, and again, that's one of the areas where it's tough to compare apples to apples.
Absolutely.
These are base plans, so
Right.
most of these school districts like ours have at least 2, maybe 3. So we have what we call our basic plan, which is
Right.
the base here. We have what we call our high, and then we have our state plan, which is the richest benefit with 0 deductible. This compares the base plan. So our base plan is at 80%. Some of these other base plans might be at 75. They also might be at 80. They might be at 85. So there's a little bit of variation.
Variance,
A
okay.
little bit of variation.
Thanks, that helps. I did have one comment, I just asking for an update, I guess. We have one contract with a night clinic, I guess, and it's PCI. And we discussed it, and you've been very, forthcoming on that. One of the issues I know has been brought to my attention is they're only open till 6, and they're not open on weekends, so it's hard for summer teachers. I know you reached out to some of the other clinics. Are we been able to bring anybody else on board?
So not yet. We have reached out to several. We're pretty close on a few.
Good.
Although I'm having to do a little more review as to what they're proposing, because there has to be a benefit to both the employer and the employee. And at least what I'm seeing so far, the benefit would be to the employee, and our plan might end up paying more on a per-visit basis. So while there could be a benefit in the urgent care facilities, because we definitely would rather have them going to an urgent care facility versus the ER,
Freestanding ERs.
we need to be careful that we don't accidentally steer employees to where it's going to cost us more as opposed to,
I agree.
yeah, so, but there's definitely two very interested in that and presented proposals. One we met with and ultimately said, no, thank you, which is fine, you know, they were obligated to. And there's at least one or two others that we're still expecting to meet with.
Good. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What do we have next?
We have Mr. Miller, who will provide an HR update based on the last workshop's follow-up questions.
We have 2 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
I'm a Yankee, I can talk fast. So tonight, I've only got really 4 topic areas. ESSER position, just bring you all up to date on ESSER position contracts, review of the $15 an hour discussions, and the review of AE and AM job classifications. So the ESSER review of ESSER position, just a reminder, ESSER funds end after the 23-24 school year. Administration is reducing the number of ESSER employees through attrition, vacancies are repurposing, and remaining ESSER employees may be repurposed depending upon vacancies and funding availability, or terminated at the end of the 23-24 school year. And you'll see in green there, the top half, there's 56 positions that we started this year that are Chapter 21 employees, we're down to 48. And the RA is reasonable assurance employees. And that bottom group is part-time employees. Any questions on ESSER? Okay, next one is contracts. So length of contracts, 3 types: minimum of 10-month contracts, 187 to 199 days, 11 months, 200 to 219 days, and 12 months, 220-plus days. So board policy, DCA legal employment practices for probationary contracts. This is applicable when the person is employed by the district for the first time, or if the person has not been employed by the district for 2 consecutive school years. That's not me, I promise. I'm old, but not that old.
Minutes are up.
If an employee has been for 5 years. 3 years. This one? And then last for probationary contracts, thank you, Adele. If an employee has 5 years of teaching experience in public education in the 8 years immediately preceding employment by the employee may only be on a probationary contract for 1 full year. And last on this page is board policy DCB, legal employment practices term contracts. Unless employed under a probationary contract or a continuing contract, a school district shall employ each classroom teacher, principal, librarian, nurse, or school counselor under a term contract. Examples of district employees working under a contract: the superintendent, associate superintendent for instructional leadership, assistant superintendent for instructional services, our assistant principals, educational diagnosticians, coordinator for fine arts, director UTRGV, McAllen ISD College Academy, director of advanced academics. And board policy DCA legal and DCB legal says any full-time professional employee required to hold a certificate issued under Education Code Chapter 21, Subchapter B. And going on to review of $15 an hour minimum pay. Due to limited funds availability, implementing a minimum pay of $15 an hour isn't affordable or sustainable at this time. Projected costs, recurring costs, to the district, $5.2 million plus fringes. And this comes from TASB's proposed salary adjustment for the general pay increase and equity adjustments to get to the $15 an hour. This includes additional employer TRS contributions. And it's important to note that this only includes clerical, instructional support, and auxiliary 3 groups. Other considerations per TASB, and I'll show you in the next slide. Some districts are at $15 an hour, have very compressed pay between their pay grades, and they're keeping their pay rates at $15 an hour versus raising rates any further. TASB recommends taking a multi-year approach versus one time. It's going to be general pay increase. GPI helps the district move toward the $15 an hour and it's more affordable and sustainable over time. And this is just a real quick minor review. So you see McAllen's rate there at the top for auxiliary, clerical, technical, and instructional support. Sharyland ISD and Mission, they're not at 15. You'll see the rates there for the various categories. These are all pay grade 1s. Brownsville ISD, they're at $15 an hour. Most of them are at pay grade 1. The exception there is the auxiliary starts out at pay grade 2. and some of the pay grades are very compressed. Edinburgh CISD, the auxiliary is at 15, op support 15, instructional support is the only one, and it's only first pay grade is at $14 an hour. Review of AE, AM job classification. Administration continues to review all administrative education, AE, and administrative management, AM, job classification. So AE job classification is typically reserved for academic duties, includes mostly contract employees with some RA, reasonable assurance employees. AM job classifications are typically management-related and in direct support of AE job classifications. And discussing with TASB up there, there's no statute or no requirement, and school districts seem to be all over the board. We're about 57%, I believe, on our AEs that are contract-type employees and RAs. So looking at this and reviewing these AEs, AMs, I am proposing that we move the student support team from AEs to AMs, because they really should be on the AM side of the house at this time. And that's my presentation, unless there's questions.
Well, starting off with the AEAM, I think generally the board was trying to differentiate the a one-time amount, lump sum amount for management positions and for the rest of the employees based on a percentage at midpoint. And it doesn't appear we're going to solve that issue, because I'm for one think that the leadership management in central office should, as we did last year and possibly are going to be looking at again this year, is to cap at a certain dollar amount for those individuals versus a 2.5 or 2% across the board for everybody, because the percentage for those individuals at 2% or even or 3%, let's use either one of those figures, is significantly much higher because their midpoint is on a much higher level. So that was the kind of the thought process that those folks, and as you recall, if you were to still have it and bring it up as to what we did, it did not work out the way most of us thought it would work, because you have at the central office some management folks in an AE or instead of an AM, or vice versa. So is there any way to separate out true management leadership positions other than this way with an AE, AM designation? Is there any way to do that?
We can look into it for sure, and benchmark other districts, but it's AE, AM seems to be the standard as we look around.
Yeah, but it doesn't work for us for what we were attempting to do, because you had some folks that, without naming job titles up there, that they got the percentage that all the employees got, which and a much higher salary, which was the concern. We kind of wanted to put a cap on that. That's why, as you recall, last time the administration came back with a recommendation with a certain amount for those individuals at that management role, and I can't remember the dollar amount, what it was, but it didn't work out for those individuals in other groups because of they qualified as in the academic side, and therefore, because they had a contract, Chapter 21, because they're on the academic side, they got the percentage. As far as what's the, during the summer, as I look at this summer schedule, you had a technical support at $13 an hour rate for remediation and recovery, and then a rate of $12 an hour for enrichment. Is that the same position as you have in your slide 7 for McAllen, a technical clerical at $12? So is that the same position? Because it says instructional assistant, computer assistant lab, and tech support. And then for clerical, well, you have secretary at $15 an hour at the summer school. Parent educator, you have them at $12 an hour. Child care aide, office clerk at $13 an hour during summer school. So is there any way that, just to cut to the chase, is there any way we can make any movement here of getting closer to the $15 minimum wage and to expand so there's no more compression? Is there any possibility of that?
Well, the summer school rates are different than what's in our salary schedule.
I understand.
Right?
Yeah, I understand.
The general pay increase will move us towards the $15 an hour, depending on what we're able to afford and things like that. I know looking at one of the local school districts that are at $15 an hour, their compression is super. It's like $15, $15.05, $15.10. I mean, it's really, they got there, but they're super compressed going above that.
Well, you know, peor es nada. I mean, you get to the 15 and then decompress a year or two down the road, but to not even make the movement, you know, I think we ought to make that movement towards the 15 minimum. And if we can't do the decompression now, we need to be planning for that and be able to decompress as we move into once we know what the legislature's going to do, we'll have a biennium, we'll know the next 2 years what it's going to look like, then we can decompress at that point. I think at the very least, if Brownsville can do it, why can't McAllen ISD? And I know they have 44,000 students and we got 20, I get it, I understand all that, but there's still dollars.
Understand, sir?
We just got to do better for our auxiliary and our staff, and if it can't be 15, what are you coming back with, so we can discuss it?
Quick question, Mr. Miller. Our contract days, we went to months. You've got it listed as months. Length of contracts?
Yeah, the contract says 10 months instead of days.
Yeah, the days aren't listed in the contract itself, it's the months, it's 10 month, 11 month, or 12 month.
When did we change that? Or when did it change?
I looked at Stan, do you remember, Stan?
Yes? So when you call somebody 187, he's really a.
I don't think it's been, if it's years, no more than 2. And that's a good, I mean, that's the right answer, it's years, but I don't think it was more than 3 years ago.
I can tell you, I looked back at my contract from 29 years ago, it was a monthly contract.
How long ago?
29?
You're not that old, Mr. Miller. Really?
So can I ask a question to follow up with that?
Sure.
So does that mean if you have a 10-month contract, does that mean you work on Saturdays, or does that count as a day, or how does that work?
The contracts.
Mr. Miller, I'm sorry, go ahead and come up so they can record it.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Kraus?
Mr. Kraus. I'm off today. So I get to look at a computer all day in my office.
So
I guess my question is, it's sold to us board members as days, right? So when it's 10 months, does that mean on Saturdays and Sundays, are they required to come in? It's part of the months.
not required, but as a salaried employee, there is no set time or days technically with that. So it can go above the 187 days to come in on a Saturday, because as salaried employees, it is possible to do that.
So when you employ someone and you're going over the contract with them, they're being told it's 10 months or 187 days? Because I think sometimes when the budget's presented to us, it's never been presented as 10-month contract. It's been presented as day contract.
Right. It is presented by the days because of the days of their calendar. So they want to know their start date and their end date. But it is based on a 10-month contract paid out over the 12
So I guess the better
months.
question is, would there be any truth to saying that they work more than 187 days?
Certainly, there's definitely, most probably do work more than 187 days when you include trainings and, other work that they do with planning.
So my suggestion, I'm just one, but in purpose of clarity, I think if you present it to the board, you should be presenting it as a 10-month contract, not as a days contract, because that's kind of misleading to us. And I'm not saying it's done purposely, but just the language is different. So when we're asked the question, like Mr. Vela, and I think all of us were like, well, I thought it was days, not months. And if it's been in the contract since you've been around, well then, so be it. But it's always been presented to me as a board member as days. So I think the language is.
Not for me. As long as my wife's been here for 15 years, it's been days, and then 10 months, and then broken down to overpayment for 12. So that's why I understood it as well, too. So I'm kind of in yours, it's like this forever, even before I came in 2005.
It does say up there, I just picked up on it, it does say minimum of 10 months at 187 to 199. And that's determining their daily rate, right? You're
Correct.
determining what their daily rate is and multiplying that out by 107 to 199 days, depending on their job assignment,
Correct.
within that 10 months.
Correct.
Minimum.
Correct.
Híjole, that's,
I mean, it's been like that, right? It's nothing new.
It's
but
nothing
just
new.
The language is different. Okay.
That is
but
correct.
I
change
do,
it when you change it.
I do see what Trustee
Yeah,
Suarez
no,
is
me
saying,
too.
though, yeah, it does, for us, it needs to be said the way it's said,
Yeah. no,
what I
we can-
just summarized.
Right.
by
no,
reading it.
We can definitely clarify that. That's not a problem.
Any other questions? I have one, Mr. Miller, can you go back to the 5 million slide where it says, I think it was talking about where you had, I'm sorry, go back to where we paid out McAllen, that one. So, let me clarify the 5 million that you said that we need recurring costs. And I know if we go to 15, are you saying additional 5 million, or is it total 5 million? Additional.
And this, if I may say, the 5.2 million is only for the clerical, the instructional, and the auxiliary group. That doesn't count the AEs, the AMs, or the teachers. So that's just those 3 buckets, if you will, to get to $15 an hour. I'm sorry, plus fringes.
It is, but, again, if we can't get there, what can we get to? I mean, a few years back, we across the board, it was $1 an hour more increase. Yeah, so can we do that, and what would that look like? But
Yeah, if you're saying like a 2-3 year plan to get us 15 or.
exactly, I think we can do it, it's just, frankly, we should have been talking about this, since we made that $1 increase 4 or 5 years ago, and so by now, we would have been at 15, if we'd done a $1 per hour minimum wage for auxiliary and staff, for the last 5 years, we'd now be at 15.
What is our cost for training our auxiliary staff? Like, what do you spend? I mean, if you don't have the numbers, but just, have we seen an increase in that the last few years because of turnover? I mean, yeah, I don't need detailed, but that might be something to look at too. If we're spending money on retraining them, and because I know there's always a cost for retraining, and if we're losing people to other surrounding school districts that are getting paid more, maybe that's something that if we increase, we'll see a reduction there. But I'm 2 months, there's not much I can do, but it'd be nice to have like a plan, and I think you're right, Sam. I think it's all of us just trying to figure out what we need to do, but we need to get to that 15 pretty sooner than later.
Minimum,
And-
in a way to decompress.
And but I'm going to disagree with you in the sense of you saying in 2 months, there's a lot to do. And I think we all see the rhetoric of what's going on in the state. And this is not a battle that's going to end in a couple of months. This is, everybody's going to have to come together. And the last thing I would want, I'm with Sam. I don't think that anybody, and when I owned my business, I never paid anybody minimum wage, right? But I also don't want to be like a surrounding school district where we promise a lot of money and then later on down the line, we're having to cut 150, 200 jobs because we overcommitted to something. We're all hoping in a couple of months, we're all going to be relieved with some good news, and hopefully we have the commitment of the superintendent that, whatever's waived our way is going to go to the employee salaries. I think the board's sentiment is that. But the last thing I want to do is put us in a predicament where we're having a meeting, an emergency meeting, because we're in a budget crisis and we have to cut employees, and we're seeing it done. I will tell you that this last Wednesday, I was in San Antonio, and I happened to turn on the news, and they have a school district there. Their enrollment's down 25%. They're having to close schools. They're having to let go of employment. Their revenue's not there. They're going to battle now the vouchers, and in San Antonio's the area where it's all coming, but I think we need to be very careful on some of the moves that we make. And you're right, retention is the most important thing. You're right. If it's true, Corrado, if it's costing us to train people, it's okay to pay them more money. It makes sense, business sense. But the last thing we want to do is make a commitment to later on, we're in a predicament we can't get out of.
The beauty is by the time this budget has to be approved, we're going to know a lot more than we do
Yeah.
today. Like you said, in 2 months,
Yeah.
we're going to know a lot more than we do today.
And this pains me, but you're absolutely right, Trustee Suarez. I can't believe I'm saying that. There's a lot to do, and because the fight's not really here on teacher pay. I know, because we fight over nickels and pennies, but we got to get the state to increase our funding. There has to be a significant pay increase. So when I come off this board, I'll be a pain in the ass, and I said it that way because I intend to, because it's not for my wife. I've always said that. It's for my daughter who's starting off, and other people who want to start an education. They can't survive. They can't live on what they're being paid, and it's a shame. So we have to do our part. And Austin, I know I'm preaching, but you're right. You got me. I just meant here, but it's going to be another. So if you want somebody to be a jerk, go talk to our state reps, whatever you call me. I'll be glad you'll wind me up again. So anyway, I'm sorry.
I do think
Ms.
that
Peña?
we are depending a lot and putting a lot of trust and hope and all on our legislature to give us some money and maybe change our funding formula, but at the same time, internally,
Yeah.
I think and I say it all the time, we're top heavy, We need to start looking at all of those positions. We need to really analyze how we're structured and how we can maybe better restructure so that internally we're not spending money on positions that, money could go to auxiliary or clerical staff as well. So I think we need to do a better job of policing ourselves with the way we fill positions and the way we structure all of that.
Awesome. Any other comments? Mr. Miller, do you have any other slides?
No, sir.
Thank you, sir. We have one more?
Yes, I'll wrap it up.
All right, take it home.
You have
One
the
might not
balance
be
of
the
his
best.
2 minutes. You have the balance of Mr. Miller's 2 minutes.
And he took 7.5.
It's not that what, they take 2 minutes, it's us asking.
Yeah.
Don't look at me.
Okay, I'll wrap it up with addressing some follow-up questions from our last board workshop. We were asked to provide a profit and loss schedule by campus as well as our campus capacity. Due to various funding sources, including special populations that are pooled together, depending on the population or programs held at each campus, we're unable to provide a per-campus student revenue due to many variables. However, we have prepared a schedule that will provide the best estimate per campus compared to their budgeted expenditures, and we will review an average cost per student per campus. But before we review, I'd like to provide an overview of how our funding is computed, which will answer, Mr. Vela, your question as far as what's our break even. So for this presentation, I will focus on the general fund, including child nutrition program and special populations. Our significant funding sources include state funding, net of the average daily attendance, our district tax effort, and our available school fund. Our property taxes based on appraised values and actual collections. Other includes indirect costs from grants, special populations, food service, interest, SHARs. And our significant operating expenditures, our outs, include campus costs, which include per-campus student allotments, salaries, resources, the food program, athletics, fine arts, and special population costs. Overhead includes department budgets, both instructional and operational, our salaries, licenses, non-campus utilities, and technology. And our maintenance tax notes, which is paid through operations.
That's about, what, 36 million right now
It is actually,
on the maintenance tax notes? Más o menos.
yes, about 36 million.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
The lowest of any school district south of San Antonio.
Correct.
It's owed, paid off is what, 30, 36?
The maintenance tax
2036?
notes would be actually in 2030. We have our bonds that are done in 2030. Maintenance tax notes is 2039.
2029. But the bond one is 2030.
Correct,
And that one, we're pretty much on principle, just doing about 6 million a year.
correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Our regular ADA is reduced by our special education and CTE ADA for a net ADA of 15,742, multiplied by our infamous 6160 with a regular allotment of almost $97 million. So generally, we use the 6160 as our per-student allotment, which makes it easier for discussion purposes. However, the state reduces that allotment based on our comptroller's assessed property values and our local tax effort. The goal of the state is to keep us, quote-unquote, balanced. Our regular allotment is then reduced by our local share based on comptroller values and our expected or historical tax collection rate. Net of available school funds and other allotments, including transportation or college prep testing reimbursements, as well as RSD, for a total of $43 million. Our special population revenues include special education, CTE, bilingual, state comp, among others, for a total of $90.1 million. Our campus budgets total over $186 million. We have other revenue sources, including property tax collections, our indirect costs received from special POPs and grants, which become unrestricted, food service revenue, other including interest, SHARs, for a total of $134 million. Overhead costs include our department budgets, our maintenance tax note, insurance, non-campus utilities, for a total of almost $45 million. So this chart shows our overage and shortfall. But since our monies are pulled together, that overage maintains our shortfall, right? So we have that 89 who gets shifted over. So to balance, typically, the goal is to be balanced or at least have overage of revenues. But if you recall, we dipped into ESSER 3 going into this school year in the amount of $6.4 million. And the difference between the 6.4 and the 6.5 is the net of the monthly budget amendments presented to date. So that's where, our budget is to try to keep it even, right? But that is where the shortfall of 6.5. But in order to give you a true picture of what our costs are for campus, I had to include what we used from ESSER 3. Go ahead.
They're talking in Austin about reducing the property tax rate for school districts only, reducing our local portion, our local funds.
Correct.
Where are they gonna make that up? And how much do we
Well-
know how much that's gonna be?
At this point, we don't know how much that will be. They are talking about additional compression because their goal is to have to save on property taxes, correct? But they're saying that we will get offset by our state funding. We haven't seen that formula come in yet, but it's never dollar for dollar. We do the math.
And it's gonna be less.
It's going to be less.
But it's not only the compression, they're also putting a cap on
Correct.
the appraised values as well.
And how often it can be capped, or
Exactly.
how can it be raised?
How
So
often can be raised.
what are the consultants telling us about the proposals that are on the table?
At this point, not final. We actually do meet on a regular basis with our Mo Casey consultant as he presents at Region 1. He will be here for our next budget workshop. So that's where we can ask all those
So
questions.
that $6 million may increase.
Depending on how we can't borrow next year. No,
No, I understand that, but if they reduce our local funding based on the property tax rate decrease,
we'd have to see how the
And we don't know
formula
where the
works
other
out for
funding
the
is gonna
state
come
allotment.
from.
Correct.
that $6
'Cause they-
million quote-unquote deficit could increase.
They do have a surplus, so it's depending on the state, yeah. But how much they're willing to provide, we don't know at this point.
But even if they do all that, if they also pass a voucher,
Then
that
we
creates
have-
a,
It creates another
Exactly.
avenue, yes.
would it be fair to say that as an example, of what could happen without the voucher, but just by the compression and the cap, what we experienced when we passed the catastrophe of 4 pennies per $100 evaluation for this year, we really didn't net the $4 million, did we?
We are starting to see that uptick. We're monitoring our tax collections now because that was effective.
January 1, yeah.
January 1st. So we're starting to notice that increase. I don't know if you recall the last one that we brought in, it went up to like 84%, if I recall correctly.
Right.
So we'll start to see the net effects once we get into the March statement.
I may have misunderstood our conversation, but I understood that projecting it out, it wasn't going to be the net of the $4 million.
It wasn't because there was other aspects.
Other aspects of compression or other aspects of how that's being applied.
But we'll provide more of an update on that.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Sam, go ahead, keep going.
Sorry.
So then this will,
No, it's a good follow-up, but there's some questions that are not answered yet.
correct. And we won't know until we get closer and we're going up to a deadline, so.
Going back to my previous question, where's our break even?
Okay, so,
To the break-even point, so we can say we can absorb this much into the budget without feeling too much of a.
well, as you can see, we are in a 6.5 down,
Down.
well, right? We haven't taken into account our normal trend of enrollment loss, our potential payroll increase, funding compression of state. So, this is what, how Lisa said, keeps her up at night. This is what keeps my team up at night, right? So, and
And it's not fair to say it's a budget deficit. It's a budget non-spend, because you can't spend, you haven't spent that money yet.
No.
So it's not really a deficit.
no,
It's not a deficit because it's not fixed. Your spend is not fixed yet.
well, it's this is our what we expect to borrow for payroll, right? This is to keep us. So when we went in, yes, we can see at the end, they didn't get to spend it depending on timing. So we were also able to recoup those, right? However, we know going in.
One time, right?
One time, yes,
One time.
one time. So we won't know until we finish the year how much payroll people come and go. As far as vacancies that are on the table, if I leave before, now we don't refill it, those vacancies, we're able to see a savings. But this is how we were able to balance our budget coming in.
Kind of risky.
Yes.
Kind
Yes.
of risky. Okay, thank you.
Problem. Okay, so this takes us to this beautiful campus schedule. So this illustrates a campus enrollment as of February 2nd compared to capacity for the 2017 MGT report. And we took the state revenues per campus based on a prorated data. This is a little different than the one I provided you because we're trying to come up with the best way to show a revenue per campus. But it's a little different. We can get into that if you'd like. But this does not, the blue does not include property taxes as monies are pulled together. If we can focus on the expenditures, this includes all budgeted expenditures, including food service and POPs at this time. So the best way we thought to compare was to map out.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't know if you had a question.
No, go ahead.
No, no,
Okay.
no.
The best way we thought to compare was to map out the average expenditures per student. So we do have a few outliers, including ING, Lamar, and Achieve. So the district's average of cost per student is $8,657. Our elementary is $8,346. Our middle school, $8,842, and our comprehensive high schools is $10,155. Now, the big jump there is due to the cost of athletics, fine arts, and CTE that are in our high schools. So, keep it short. So to summarize, this is our funding model along with our budget expenditures by campus. I hope I've addressed some of your questions. Do you have any questions for me? No, go.
The MGT report is 6 years old.
Correct.
How valid are those numbers today? I mean, have you
Well-
updated the variables involved in giving us this data
Well,
6 years ago?
Well, since we haven't changed the facilities much, the capacity remains the capacity. So no, we did not go back and try to reevaluate.
Are we using the basis system now? Because that was the whole, part of the deal with MGT was we would get, there's two programs we're going to get. One was basis, and that was supposed to be used. The way I see it, it's no different than tapers, it's no different than PEAMS, it's no different than iRead, it's no different than STAR. Those are all required by the state. We had required that when we did the MGT of America, that we would use the basis system, and I forgot the name of the other one, I had it written down, and I come to find out, it's my understanding, we're not using it. And the reason for that, if we had been using it, and incorporated in our report from facilities, then we would see on a monthly basis of where we are as far as population on campus, where we are on costs, operating costs, and so that and in fact, it says in the MGT report when it introduces all this and lays it out, so this will help the decision makers make the necessary adjustments as we move forward when it comes to facilities and use of space for educating our children. So I think it's very important that we do get an updated one. If this was from 2018, was the last entries I'm seeing on our website.
Okay.
This is very good, by the way. I really appreciate that summary that you have, but I'm not sure that that's the current, is it? Is that masking in from the MGT report and the current data together?
So yeah, so this is the MGT report as of what the capacity values,
Gotcha.
right? That's what I took from the MGT, what we took from the MGT
Gotcha,
report.
okay.
Compared to our February enrollment at that campus, and then we laid it out, and then we prorated because again, it's difficult with the special populations and who we're servicing at each campus. So that was the best way to provide the,
Yeah.
so then we took the average and we computed that.
The
right.
capacity hasn't changed with.
Exactly, so we've left the capacity alone with that.
Well, it's good to hear, because the conversation I had, someone from staff, was that they felt we needed to go back and verify, and I said, well,
Yep.
that's something for the team of 8 to kind of discuss.
We can discuss that.
But I told, my thought is that unless you know for a fact that there was significant changes in those classroom spaces due to a program or consolidation of space into a larger classroom for whatever reason, but that's up to you to decide. But the point of the matter, I think we as a board and and you as an administrator, we have to know this as to how you know, delivering services to our children in the space with the staff that we need. And we have to know the cost, because that is a fair way and for the community to see if we need to be consolidating any further, or we need to make adjustments. Like, I feel like we got to get kids out of portable buildings, and those classrooms, if they're classrooms sitting empty in a building somewhere in the district, that's where our children should be.
So a little further than from the schedule that was provided, we worked on adding, so the schedule here, what we ended up taking is, you know, reducing our overhead costs, right? We reduced our overhead costs, we prorated based on enrollment. So what you'll see in the purple columns, we tried to the best to estimate our prorated revenues. Do you have, I'm not sure if you have those two columns. We added two columns.
I see expenditures on the far right. Is that what you're talking about?
No, so we added, I don't know if I can.
Oh, the FI,
Yeah, so we added two P and L columns.
Okay,
the
we
total
don't have
revenues,
that.
Yes,
No.
and I'll send that your way. So we kind of did some, you know, you rethink, you kind of, how we're gonna best display this. So we took all of our costs, if you recall, from our $180 million of campus budget. We took out our overhead costs, and then we prorated those revenues based on the enrollment at each campus to give you our best estimate, right? So
when you see parentheses, that means it's in the negative.
correct, right? Here, however.
There's a
we
lot of
get-
positives there, though.
We get a lot of positives in these areas here, but it nets out to the 6.5 at this point.
Got you.
The same 6.5.
See, that's the way we need to have.
Yeah, so I will send you this
since
schedule.
2018.
However, this will be, you know, prorated revenues based on enrollment. That's what we can provide at this time.
This is where the rubber meets the road, where we make the best decisions because we have the real data we need to analyze and discuss and make the hard decisions to be made. And there's obviously quite a bit to make when you look at that.
Well, we also got to think about what expenditures are in there as well. We have the athletics, the fine arts, the special programs that are included in there, which we don't get that per student.
Got it.
So those are other variables.
Right. This is a lot better than we were 5 minutes ago.
I was still talking 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, but we didn't see that P and L. We didn't see that P and L.
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
MGT
no problem.
report, I think, went so far as to tell us occupied space within campuses for maximum efficiency of the campus.
Okay.
Have we gone over those numbers?
I have not, but we will talk as a team and we can go.
All right, and then the number, the 96, 94, is that an average or is that the median?
96, 94.
The bottom of the expenditures per
Oh, that's
student?
just a medium per student. It's an average,
It's
it's
an
an average of all the, an average, I'm sorry, I said medium.
And then we've got some pretty low numbers there also, we look at the column.
Mm-hmm.
Have we gone back to see what it is that brings the per student expenditures down?
Well, it
The
all,
best practices in other campuses that have a higher per student?
well, if I focus on one school, it's because the teachers are there, but I have more students there, right? So that's gonna be the cost. So I have,
No. Not if you have the same number of teacher per students
Yeah, but you don't.
ratio,
You don't.
right? So what else is causing that variance?
well, we can
another-
dissect it. Go
If I
ahead.
may, I think one of the parts is also the master schedule. So block scheduling is more expensive. So you have a teacher teaching 3 sections and they're teaching 75 students versus the teacher teaching 6 sections of 50 minutes. So you have, it's either 90-minute blocks or 45 to 50-minute classes. So you can teach double the students, 150 students in 6 sections, or you can teach 3 blocks and have 75 students in double the time. We choose to go with blocks in middle school, which is more expensive but more effective. And the same is true if you look at the Lamar Academy schedule. There's some inefficiencies that we've worked into that one with regard to the number of blocks that they have, number of time off the teachers have, and things of that sort, but it's beneficial to the system. I believe that that's why, we have a high graduation rate when you look at the diploma year program, doing better than most schools across the world. So there's some inefficiencies like every business that they work in, and for us, block scheduling is a big part of that. And then we also have 2 planning periods for teachers. Districts surrounding us have 1. So that's a more expensive model, but we believe that our teachers utilize that time effectively. So master scheduling plays a big role in what we're getting.
And Dr. Gonzalez, I appreciate that, but having said that, is there any way to show us what that would look like if, with those 2 columns?
Yes, sir.
So that we can then separate that out and very easily see this is what master schedule does, this is what the extra break does.
Yes, sir.
To that cost.
Yes, sir.
So we have a clear understanding.
One of your lowest schools is Morris. In fact, 4 of your lowest per student expenditures are your middle schools, Fossum, Morris, De Leon, and Cathy. So,
We can dissect it a little
Yeah.
further.
okay. Maybe there may be something there.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
No, sir.
Awesome. Anything else, Ms. Felix?
I'm good, thank you.
Dr. Salas, you want to close this out?
Yes, I do want to thank the board for the discussion. It helps the team as we prepare our budget, and it helps us just really set a game plan. And we're a very high-performing school district. We have a board that guides us well, so kudos to the team for the heavy lifting. And to the points I already made, hopefully the state legislators are looking at public ed and really looking at funding us based on enrollment and not weighted average daily attendance, and then upping the per student, I guess, what they're giving us per student. So those are the things that are going to make a big difference, and we'll find out in the very near future.
Awesome.
Good
Ms.
work,
Felix?
Adele.
Yes.
Yeah, good work.
Mr.
Your
Miller?
team,
Hey, everybody,
good work.
Everybody.
Bridget, Alec, good job.
very good presentation.
When you send the email out, can you include the candidates as well so they
Yes.
can get updated?
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other business? All right, we will conclude our meeting at 7:25. Thank you.
Thank you.